So I picked a topic I thought would be interesting. I could be wrong, I don't know. But we can try. So I chose a TED Talk for us to watch together. It's called A Kinder, Gentler Philosophy of Success. It's by a man called Alain de Botton. Has anyone here heard about School of Life before? School of Life, anyone? No. Okay, so this guy started a practical school for teaching people like philosophy of life. And he gives this talk about how we should define success. So I'm sure all of you have thought about it. What does it mean to be successful? I'm sure everyone here has an idea about what success looks like. Are you all familiar with the word success? Yes? So that's basically the main theme of this conversation, chat room today. I have some vocabulary here so we can all sort of meet at the same place. Meritocracy is something we're going to hear about in the TED Talk. A meritocracy is a society governed by people selected according to merit. Merit means doing something well, or being smart, or having a quality that helps people do things in some way. Okay. So meritocracy is that's a country or a company that works this way. If you're useful or you know things, you are seen as high value or more important. Okay. So in a sentence, they said Britain is a meritocracy and everyone with skill and imagination may aspire to reach the highest level. Okay. Another meaning of meritocracy is a ruling or influential class of educated or able people. So we have some general questions here that I've written up beforehand. What we will do later on is I will divide you into groups of 2 or 3, and you guys can try to answer the question together in English. And then we'll discuss it as a group. So first things first, do you have any questions for me? Is there anything you want to know about me or this course? Let's watch the video, and then after the video, after we start the discussion, at the end, I want to play a game with you guys. Okay? It's going to involve telling truths and lies and points and stuff like that. So first we'll do the discussion and then we play a game. Okay?
然后你写完之后，请里面那个老师他帮你签名。签完名之后，你这张纸交给你的英文老师，交给他之前的话，请你先对他之前先拍照，因为有些老师。然后。
So I just wanted to ask, how is your English level? So good or not so good? How would you say? Like 5 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 1 out of 10. How are we? Because there's a speed here, so if you want, I can slow down the speech a little bit.
Career crises, often actually on a Sunday evening, just as the sun is starting to set and the gap between my hopes for myself and the reality of my life start to diverge so painfully that I normally end up weeping into a pillow. I'm mentioning all this because I think this is not merely a personal problem. You may think I'm wrong in this, but I think that we live in an age when our lives are regularly punctuated by career crises, by moments when what we thought we knew about our lives, about our careers, comes into contact with a threatening sort of reality. It's perhaps easier now than ever before to make a good living. It's perhaps harder than ever before to stay calm, to be free of career anxiety.
Is that fast for you? Do you want it slower, or is that okay? Can you understand? Slower is better? Okay. Let's try to refresh this. Yeah. So
For me, they normally happen, these career crises, often actually on a Sunday evening, just as the sun is starting to set and the gap between my hopes for myself and the reality of my life start to diverge so painfully that I normally end up weeping into a pillow. I'm mentioning all this because I think this is not merely a personal problem. You may think I'm wrong in this, but I think that we live in an age when our lives are regularly punctuated by career crises, by moments when what we thought we knew about our lives, about our careers, comes into contact with a threatening sort of reality. It's perhaps easier now than ever before to make a good living. It's perhaps harder than ever before to stay calm, to be free of career anxiety. And I want to look now, if I may, at some of the reasons why we might be feeling anxiety about our careers, why we might be victims of these career crises as we're weeping softly into our pillows. One of the reasons why we might be suffering is that we are surrounded by snobs. Now, in a way, I've got some bad news, particularly for anybody who's come to Oxford from abroad. There's a real problem with snobbery because sometimes people from outside the UK imagine that snobbery is a distinctively UK phenomenon fixated on country houses and titles. The bad news is that's not true. Snobbery is a global phenomenon. We're a global organisation. This is a global phenomenon. It exists as, what is a snob? A snob is anybody who takes a small part of you and uses that to come to a complete vision of who you are. That is snobbery. And the dominant kind of snobbery that exists nowadays is job snobbery. You encounter it within minutes at a party when you get asked that famous, iconic question of the early 21st century, what do you do? And according to how you answer that question, people are either incredibly delighted to see you or look at their watch and make their excuses. Now, the opposite of a snob is your mother. Not necessarily your mother, or indeed mine, but as it were the ideal mother. Somebody who doesn't care about your achievements. But unfortunately, most people are not our mothers. Most people make a strict correlation between how much time and, if you like, love, not romantic love, though that may be something, but love in general, respect, they are willing to accord us. That will be strictly defined by our position in the social hierarchy. And that's a lot of the reason why we care so much about our careers, and indeed start caring so much about material goods. You know, we're often told that we live in very materialistic times, that we're all greedy people. I don't think we are particularly materialistic. I think we live in a society which has simply pegged certain emotional rewards to the acquisition of material goods. It's not the material goods we want, it's the rewards we want. And that's a new way of looking at luxury goods. The next time you see somebody driving a Ferrari, don't think this is somebody who's greedy. Think this is somebody who's incredibly vulnerable and in need of love. In other words, feel sympathy rather than contempt. There are other reasons. There are other reasons why it's perhaps harder now to feel calm than ever before. One of these, and it's paradoxical because it's linked to something that's rather nice, is the hope we all have for our careers. Never before have expectations been so high about what human beings can achieve with their lifespan. We're told from many sources that anyone can achieve anything. We've done away with the caste system. We are now in a system where anyone can rise to any position they please, and it's a beautiful idea. Along with that has come a spirit of equality. We're all basically equal. There are no strictly defined kind of hierarchies. There's one really big problem with this, and that problem is envy. Envy, it's a real taboo to mention envy, but if there's one dominant emotion in modern society, that is envy, and it's linked to the spirit of equality. Let me explain. I think it would be very unusual for anyone here or anyone watching to be envious of the Queen of England, even though she's much richer than any of you are, and she's got a very large house. The reason why we don't envy her is because she's too weird. She's simply too strange. We can't relate to her, she speaks in a funny way, she comes from a sort of odd place. So we can't relate to her, and when you can't relate to somebody, you don't envy them. The closer two people are in age, in background, in the process of identification, the more there's a danger of envy, which is incidentally why none of you should ever go to a school reunion, because there is no stronger reference point than people one was at school with. But the problem generally of modern society is that it turns the whole world into a school. Everybody's wearing jeans, everybody's the same, and yet they're not. So there's a spirit of equality combined with deep inequalities, which can make for a very stressful situation. It's probably as unlikely that you would nowadays become as rich and famous as Bill Gates, as it was unlikely in the 17th century that you would accede to the ranks of the French aristocracy. But the point is, it doesn't feel that way. It's made to feel by magazines and other media outlets that if you've got energy, a few bright ideas about technology, a garage, you too could start a major thing. And the consequences of this problem make themselves felt in bookshops. When you go to a large bookshop and look at the self-help sections, as I sometimes do, if you analyze self-help books that are produced in the world today, there are basically two kinds. The first kind tells you, you can do it, you can make it, anything's possible. And the other kind tell you how to cope with what we politely call low self-esteem, or impolitely call feeling very bad about yourself. There's a real correlation